They say the cruelest wounds aren't the ones that bleed, but the ones that quietly reshape who we are. Meet Elena Whitaker, a gentle heart and brilliant mind whose world was shattered the day she discovered her husband's cruel taunts and secret affair. He mocked her pregnancy in front of his mistress, humiliating her in the very home they'd built together. Little did he know the woman he dismissed held far greater power than he could ever imagine. Justice would soon shine a spotlight on the truth. In a courtroom charged with tension, the world learned that Elena was no ordinary woman. She was, in fact, a CEO. Elena Whitaker was the kind of woman whose eyes sparkled with quiet determination, even on her darkest days. Raised in a modest home in rural Oregon, she understood the value of hard work and honest living. Her parents, Gerald and Marilyn Davis, had invested their lives in a small family diner on the outskirts of Eugene. Day after day, they instilled in their daughter a core belief: treat others with respect and kindness, no matter what storms life tosses in your path. It was in college that Elena first encountered Brandon Whitaker. He was a gregarious, ambitious young man with quick wit and a disarming smile. Brandon's background was very different from Elena's. Born into a wealthy family in Miami, he carried a sense of entitlement on his shoulders. He was used to getting what he wanted, often effortlessly. Yet there was something about Elena's sincerity that captivated him, and something about Brandon's confidence that intrigued her from the start. Elena sensed Brandon craved success above all else. Sometimes she even worried he confused ambition with greed. Yet for reasons she couldn't quite name, she trusted him to respect her choices. After all, he promised her the world. She was young, in love, and hopeful. In the first few years of marriage, Elena and Brandon found themselves building the typical suburban life. Elena worked as a mid-level marketing executive at a boutique firm called Verity Collective. Brandon, always bouncing from one project to another, styled himself as an entrepreneur. He jumped from real estate deals to tech startups, always proclaiming to have found the next big thing. When they moved to Seattle, Elena took on a more senior role at a larger advertising agency, Manning & Co., to support them financially. Even then, subtle warning signs emerged. Brandon's once charming confidence grew into arrogance. He would complain that Elena's job was not enough, that she should be doing more to prove she was worth his time and love. When her father died suddenly from a heart attack, Brandon's support was strangely tepid. Instead of comforting Elena in her grief, he ranted about the inheritance not being substantial. That day, though her heart was still in love, Elena felt the first crack in her faith toward Brandon. Years passed in a blur of overtime hours, strategic marketing meetings, and mounting tension at home. Elena's mother had moved in briefly, only to find Brandon cold and dismissive. Marilyn Davis, with a mother's protective intuition, tried to warn her daughter that Brandon's behavior was growing. Unhealthy, Elena brushed it off, determined to see the best in him. Then came the day that would change everything. Elena realized her period was late, very late. One pregnancy test later, and her heart soared in both excitement and trepidation. She was going to be a mother. Despite the strains in her marriage, she believed this news could reignite the love that once bonded them. With trembling hands, she prepared a small gift box with a positive test and a pair of baby booties. She waited for Brandon to come home that evening. Brandon strode in, complaining about traffic and how the barista got his coffee order wrong. Again. Heart-pounding, Elena presented him with the box. He opened it with a puzzled frown. When realization dawned, he blinked in surprise. Elena hoped to see excitement flash across his face, maybe tears of joy. Instead, his shoulders sagged and his mouth thinned into a tight line. "You should have told me you were late," he muttered. "Do we even have the finances for a baby right now?" Elena's heart sank. She forced a smile, pushing aside the sting, hoping that he would come around once the initial shock wore off. Over the next few weeks, Brandon's behavior turned even colder. He spent more time out networking and less time talking to Elena. It seemed every conversation ended in an argument about money or his new business ventures. His phone buzzed incessantly, and he was evasive about who was calling. Elena's anxiety grew with her pregnancy, though she kept up her duties at Manning & Co. The stress was taking a toll on her health. One evening, Elena decided to wait up for Brandon. Midnight came and went. Yet he still hadn't returned. Worried, she called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. She tried to distract herself by reorganizing baby items in the nursery, a small sunlit room they'd set aside. At nearly 2 a.m., Brandon stumbled in, smelling of expensive wine and perfume that wasn't hers. Elena asked where he'd been. He simply brushed her off, claiming a late-night business meeting. But the bright red lipstick stain near his collar told a different story. That night, Elena felt a silent devastation, yet part of her refused to believe the worst. She wanted proof, not accusations born of suspicion. A week later, while doing laundry, Elena found a credit card statement in Brandon's pants pocket. A fancy restaurant reservation in the name of Madison Cole jumped out at her. The date matched one of Brandon's networking nights. Heart-pounding, Elena looked up the restaurant, Soleil Lounge, an upscale romantic spot known for candlelit dinners and velvet-upholstered booths. There was no mistaking the nature of this evening. Confronting Brandon, Elena demanded an explanation. He sneered, rolling his eyes. "Are you prying into my finances now?" he spat. "You should focus on not stressing the baby. My private life is my business." His private life. The words spun around in her head, unleashing a storm of heartbreak. Her once warm and secure home now felt like a battlefield. The happy future she'd envisioned with her husband disintegrated each time he walked out the door. The walls that once echoed laughter now seemed to close in around her, cold and foreign. The man she had trusted with her heart had become a stranger, and her sense of safety shattered. Unable to keep her hurt bottled up, Elena confided in her coworker and friend, Jasmine Bell, a brilliant advertising director at Manning & Co. Jasmine listened gravely, urging Elena to protect herself emotionally and financially. "You've got to look out for you and the baby," Jasmine said, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. "Don't let him walk over you. You're stronger than you think." Soon enough, Elena discovered that Madison Cole was not only Brandon's mistress, but also a rumored socialite from a wealthy family in San Diego. The rumor mill suggested that Madison craved attention and never settled for less than luxury. In Brandon, she'd found a kindred spirit who adored status and flaunted extravagance. Elena confronted him again. This time she threatened to walk out if he didn't stop seeing Madison. Brandon responded coldly, "Where would you go? You can't raise a kid alone, and you certainly can't keep up your lifestyle without me." The cruelty in his eyes sliced through Elena's heart. She had hoped for remorse, some flicker of the man she married. Instead, she saw nothing but icy self-interest and disdain. It was a quiet devastation, not loud or dramatic, but the kind that eroded a person piece by piece. As the pregnancy advanced, Elena tried to focus on her health, but the emotional turmoil weighed heavily. Her obstetrician, Dr. Noelle Sterling, worried about Elena's elevated blood pressure and told her to avoid stress as much as possible. "High stress can lead to complications, Elena," the doctor said gently. Elena nodded. But how could she find peace when her husband was parading around with another woman? At night, she lay awake, hands cradling her growing belly, whispering silent apologies to her unborn child. She wanted to be stronger for both of them, but the weight of betrayal pressed down like a vice. The final straw came one weekend. Brandon claimed he had an urgent meeting with potential investors. Elena, feeling uneasy, decided to quietly follow him in a taxi. He headed straight to the Cavendish Hotel, where a lavish charity gala was taking place. Slipping inside, Elena spotted Brandon and Madison in a cozy corner, locked in an intimate conversation. Elena's heart hammered in her chest as she saw him lean in to kiss Madison. She marched up to them. Brandon froze, eyes flicking with irritation rather than guilt. Madison looked Elena up and down with a smirk. "This must be the wife," she said in a mocking tone. Before Elena could speak, Brandon sneered, "Don't start a scene, Elena. You're embarrassing yourself." Then, with horrifying callousness, he announced to a few onlookers nearby, "She's pregnant, sure. But let's be honest, her salary can't even support her own unborn child properly." He laughed, and Madison joined in the cruel chorus. Elena trembled with anger and humiliation. Elena turned and fled the hotel, tears scalding her cheeks. Everything inside her screamed that this was not only a betrayal, but an assault on her dignity. She wasn't just fighting for her marriage, she was fighting for her self-respect. The sting of his words echoed in her ears with every step, Embarrassing? Can't even support. Each one a cruel slash across her pride. She clutched her stomach instinctively, as if shielding her baby from the toxicity, from the venom that had once disguised itself as love. By the time she reached the street, her breathing had grown shallow. Her vision blurred, not just from tears, but from the rising wave of panic. It had been years since she'd felt this. The quickened heart rate, the tightness in her chest, the old, unwelcome sensation she thought she'd outgrown in college. Anxiety. It crept in like smoke under a door. Elena stopped near a bench, gripping the backrest, focusing on long, slow breaths. She couldn't afford to break. Not now. Early the next morning, Elena received an unexpected text from a blocked number. "I'm sorry for how you were treated. He's not worth it. You deserve better." Shocked, Elena reread the message, suspecting it might be from Madison or someone close to Brandon. But as quickly as it had come, the number disappeared. It felt strangely comforting that someone, somewhere, had recognized how she'd been wronged. It didn't erase the pain, but it reminded her, however briefly, that she wasn't invisible. Her suffering hadn't gone unnoticed. Weary but curious, Elena confided in Jasmine again. Jasmine insisted she had to take control of her own life. Over lunch at a small cafe near Manning & Co., Jasmine gently took Elena's hands and said, "Elena, you're brilliant at what you do. Your presentations are top-notch. You have the entire skill set to start your own venture. If you wanted," she continued, "you don't need Brandon's approval or his money, especially not after how he's treating you." Elena sipped her coffee, thinking of how she'd dreamt of running her own marketing firm one day. She had never seriously considered it before, mainly due to family obligations and the belief that Brandon might not support such an endeavor. Now, she wondered why she had ever allowed someone else's opinion to gatekeep her potential. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel afraid, just curious. What if? The idea that she could step out from behind his shadow and pursue something on her own set a tiny ember of hope glowing inside her. That ember caught a spark when fate intervened in the form of a phone call. An old college professor, Dr. Leonard Crane, reached out to Elena about a friend who was seeking top-level marketing expertise for a new tech product launch. The friend, Derek Hanley, was the founder of Nimbus Creative, a startup with significant investor backing. They wanted a fresh marketing strategy and were willing to pay handsomely for the right talent. Elena saw an opportunity. With Jasmine's encouragement, she quietly began consulting with Nimbus Creative during evenings and weekends. She took meticulous notes, mapped out marketing campaigns, and sketched potential brand identities. Despite her blossoming pregnancy, she poured her heart into the project, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. With every client meeting and draft strategy, she began piecing herself back together. Not as a wife, not as a victim, but as the driven, capable woman she once believed she could be. Brandon remained oblivious, too consumed with parading around with Madison. By day, Elena still put on a brave face at Manning & Co., though she knew she might soon have to part ways if the consulting gig turned into something bigger. Unbeknownst to Brandon, each paycheck from her consulting work went into a separate bank account. She was preparing for a future on her own. One day, Derek Hanley called Elena in for an urgent meeting. The campaign proposals she drafted had wowed his investors, and they wanted her full-time. As chief marketing officer, the compensation package was substantial, complete with a generous sign-on bonus and stock options. Elena's heart soared, but she also hesitated. She was pregnant, dealing with an unfaithful husband, and uncertain if she could juggle so many changes at once. But Derek didn't waver. "Elena, your skills are unique, and your insights are unmatched. We need you," he said emphatically. Feeling a surge of self-confidence, Elena accepted the position. This was her chance to break free from Brandon's toxic control. Over dinner that evening, she mustered the courage to tell Brandon about her new job offer, hoping for some semblance of support. Instead, his response was scornful. "A startup tech job? Nonsense. That's a joke. You're too naive to see when you're being used." His dismissive attitude only fueled Elena's resolve. She smiled politely, retreated to her room, and resolved to finalize her plans to leave him the moment she felt secure in her new role. She also vowed to keep her unborn child safe from Brandon's negativity at all costs. The tension in the Whitaker household escalated day by day. Brandon, oblivious to Elena's growing independence, continued to flaunt his affair. He posted pictures of lavish outings with Madison on social media, though he never explicitly mentioned her identity. Friends began to ask Elena awkward questions, and she deflected them with carefully measured responses. She refused to let the public see her pain, but inside she seethed. At Nimbus Creative, Elena threw herself into work. Her early marketing campaigns were a roaring success, drawing attention from major tech blogs and even mainstream media outlets. Investors praised her creativity and leadership. Derek Hanley, impressed by her management style, began hinting that he wanted to groom her for an even higher executive position, perhaps CEO of a newly formed spin-off brand. Elena felt the ground shifting under her feet, in the best way possible. Her life was about to change yet again, but this time, she would be in the driver's seat. Meanwhile, Brandon had no clue about the magnitude of Elena's achievements. He only saw that she was wasting time at a startup. One evening, he came home in a foul mood, reeking of whiskey. Madison had apparently complained that Brandon was not fulfilling his promises of giving her a glamorous life. He directed all his frustration at Elena. She was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing documents for an upcoming product launch, when Brandon stormed in. "You're spending all your time at that worthless job," he yelled, slamming a cabinet door. "Look at this house. It's not even clean. And you think you can handle a baby?" Elena's patience snapped. She stood up, faced him directly, and declared, "I'm doing what I need to do for me and our child. If you don't like it, that's your problem." Brandon laughed bitterly. "Our child? Don't kid yourself. You know you can't raise it alone. You need me." He advanced toward her with a menacing glare. Terrified for her safety and the baby's, Elena stepped away, heart pounding. Suddenly her phone rang, cutting the tension. It was Derek Hanley calling about an urgent investor update. Brandon scoffed at the interruption and stormed out, leaving Elena trembling, but resolute. The time for living in fear was over. In the weeks that followed, Elena quietly prepared her exit strategy. She kept a journal of every threatening or humiliating statement Brandon made. She also documented his repeated absences and compiled screenshots of his social media posts with Madison. Her friend Jasmine advised her to consult an attorney, so Elena visited Camille Prescott at a respected law firm, Wallace & Finch. Camille was known for her fierce advocacy on behalf of wronged spouses. Camille listened patiently as Elena poured out her story, tears brimming in her eyes. "Your safety and your baby's safety are paramount," Camille said firmly. "We'll file a restraining order if needed, and we'll ensure you receive proper spousal support. But first, I want to understand your financial situation and your new job thoroughly." Elena disclosed her new position and how her salary was rapidly increasing alongside stock options. She revealed her plan to leave Brandon once she found a new place to live. But even as she laid out the facts, Elena's voice wavered. A part of her, small but persistent, ached at the thought of raising a child without a father in the picture. Would Caleb someday resent her? Would he ask questions she couldn't answer? The guilt crept in, uninvited and sharp. She had to remind herself again and again, protection was not abandonment. Choosing peace was not punishment. Camille assured her that everything could be arranged discreetly. The attorney urged her to stay cautious. People like Brandon can become volatile when they realize their control is slipping, she warned. Despite Elena's attempt at discretion, rumors eventually reached Brandon. He found out. One day, rummaging through mail on the kitchen counter, he came across a bank statement for Elena's separate account. The hefty deposit from Nimbus Creative stunned him. Enraged at the prospect of losing financial control, he confronted Elena yet again. "You think you can just sneak around hoarding money?" he snarled, waving the bank statement in front of her. "Who do you think you are?" Elena didn't cower this time. Slowly standing, she met his glare head-on. "I'm someone who's tired of being treated like dirt. I'm building a future for me and our baby, with or without you." There was a moment of stunned silence. Elena could see confusion in Brandon's eyes, as though he'd never imagined a scenario where she could thrive independently. He spat a bitter laugh and stormed off. But for Elena, that fleeting exchange was a victory. She had found her voice, and with it, a sense of freedom. The rain pattered softly against the windows of Elena's condo, painting streaks across the glass as if nature itself mourned with her. She sat at her small dining table, surrounded by paperwork, her swollen belly pressed gently against the edge. The baby, still unnamed, kicked from within, as if reminding her that he was there. A life forming, a future coming. Elena rubbed her stomach, instinctively letting out a tired sigh. The weeks had been long and heavy, between late-night strategy calls for Nimbus Creative and the creeping anxiety of her crumbling marriage. She hadn't had a moment to exhale, to feel anything beyond duty and survival. Every step forward felt like wading through mud, and yet she kept moving. Then the call came. Her phone buzzed quietly. Derek Hanley, the screen read. She hesitated. It wasn't a scheduled meeting. Something wrong? Hello, she answered, her voice cautious but steady. Elena, Derek's voice came through warm and deliberate. I need to speak with you in person, if you can manage within the hour. She sat across from him in the Nimbus Creative conference room, clutching a thermos of decaf coffee as she fought to still her trembling hands. The atmosphere was different. More focused, more intense. Derek wasn't his usual jovial self. He looked as if he was about to drop a bombshell. I'll be direct, he said, resting his elbows on the table. Your work has been exceptional. Investors are beyond impressed. We've decided to launch a new subsidiary, Nimbus Studio, and we want you to run it. Elena blinked. Run it? He smiled. As CEO. Time seemed to freeze. The words hovered in the air like snowflakes suspended mid-fall. Elena stared at him, her mind struggling to catch up. You want me to be CEO? She repeated the words slowly as if trying the title on for size. Her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. Derek nodded. Yes, you're not just good at what you do, Elena. You lead. You inspire. You've transformed this brand in weeks. Imagine what you could do with full authority. Her eyes stung unexpectedly. No one had spoken to her like this in years. Not since college, perhaps not since before Brandon. Not since she was simply Elena Davis, a woman full of ambition and belief. She placed a protective hand over her belly. I'm pregnant. I'm about to be a single mother. This is a lot. What if I can't handle it all? Derek leaned forward, sincerity softening his tone. Elena, your pregnancy doesn't make you less capable. If anything, it shows your resilience. You've juggled more under pressure than most people ever will. You don't have to say yes right now. The announcement can wait until after your baby is born. But I wanted you to know, we see you. We believe in you. She covered her mouth with her hand, overcome. Emotions rushed in, a tidal wave of disbelief, gratitude, fear, and something deeper, validation. For years, she had been made to feel small, like her dreams were too loud, too inconvenient. And now someone was handing her the keys to a future she thought she'd lost. Tears slipped down her cheeks silently. She didn't try to stop them. I'll do it, she whispered, her voice full of quiet strength. I'll accept. Derek smiled. Then let's build something incredible together. That night, back in her condo, Elena stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time, in what felt like forever, she didn't feel like she was just surviving. She was becoming. Brandon didn't know it yet, but the woman he thought he'd broken was already rising. One decision, one heartbeat at a time, and soon, the world would call her something new. CEO. Unfortunately, Brandon would not let her slip away so easily. During her 8th month of pregnancy, Elena came home one last time to pack her belongings. Brandon was in the living room, smirking. Madison was there too, perched on the couch like she owned the place. Elena's heart pounded at the brazen display of disrespect. The very home she once nurtured with love had become unrecognizable, its warmth replaced with cold entitlement. Every picture frame, every memory, now looked like props in someone else's performance. You think you can just leave me without consequences? Brandon taunted. Madison and I have decided to get married once we finalize our divorce. And guess what? There won't be much left for you in the settlement. My father's lawyer is the best in the city. Madison giggled. Yes, Elena, if that's your name, don't be too upset. Brandon told me your child was unplanned anyway. Her words dripped with sarcasm and cruelty. Elena's cheeks burned with anger, but she refused to respond with the same venom. A part of her ached to scream, to throw back every betrayal in their faces, but she knew better. Dignity wasn't weakness. It was restraint sharpened by experience. She quietly picked up her suitcase before walking out. She leveled a calm stare at Brandon. I hope you're happy with the choices you've made. One day, you'll realize what you lost." With that, she shut the door on him and the life they once shared. Elena settled into her temporary condo, a stark yet comforting contrast to the lavish, tension-filled house she left behind. Each day, she prepared for the birth of her child while juggling the responsibilities of her demanding job. Jasmine came by regularly, helping to assemble baby furniture and pack a hospital bag. During these visits, they shared stories of the old days, letting laughter replace pain. For the first time in months, Elena allowed herself to exhale. The silence of the condo wasn't lonely, it was healing. But some nights, that silence deepened into doubt. One evening, long after Jasmine had left and the city lights flickered quietly through the blinds, Elena sat alone on her bed, cradling her belly. The apartment was still, but inside her, emotions churned. What if she failed? What if she wasn't enough, not just as a mother, but as everything? The fear was primal, wordless. She wept softly into her hands, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of doing it all alone. And then the baby kicked, small, steady, real. It grounded her, reminded her she wasn't just surviving, she was building, and she would continue, one breath, one choice at a time. On a breezy afternoon, Elena officially filed for divorce with Camille's help. The paperwork was straightforward, but emotionally heavy. Elena was ready to fight for custody of her child and ensure their future was secure. Camille was optimistic, given Elena's stable job, independent finances, and a documented history of Brandon's mistreatment. Shortly after, Brandon's attorney, a slick operator named Daniel Voss, filed a counter-petition. They contested nearly everything, from spousal support to custody arrangements, and painted Elena as unstable and unable to cope with the rigors of single parenthood. Brandon wanted full custody, or at least enough to reduce child support obligations. Elena reeled with disbelief at the gall of it all, but she didn't panic. She had prepared thoroughly, saving every piece of evidence. The court date loomed just a few weeks away. Tensions rose, but Elena remained focused. She rehearsed her statements with Camille. She refused to stoop to Brandon's level of pettiness or name-calling. Her strategy was simple: present the truth. In the quiet hours of the night, she whispered affirmations to her unborn child, promising strength, protection, and a life built on love, not power. Life, however, had one more surprise in store before the trial. Elena went into labor unexpectedly, at 36 weeks. Alone in her condo, she felt the first contraction tear through her abdomen. Fear gripped her. She wasn't fully prepared. She grabbed her phone and called Jasmine, who rushed over immediately and dialed 911. The ambulance arrived, and Elena was whisked to Harborview Medical Center. Hours later, in a whirlwind of pain and hope, Elena gave birth to a baby boy. She named him Caleb. Holding him in her arms, Elena felt a surge of protective love. This tiny infant was her reason for fighting, her beacon of hope in the darkest storm. Caleb came out slightly premature, but healthy enough to breathe on his own. The doctors kept him in the neonatal unit for a few days to ensure no complications arose. Brandon was conspicuously absent. He didn't visit the hospital at all. When word finally reached him, Madison apparently discouraged him from going, complaining that Elena was trying to trap him with emotional manipulation. So Brandon stayed away, further proving to Elena that she was doing the right thing by leaving him. Once Caleb stabilized, Elena took him home to the condo, where Jasmine had baby-proofed the essentials. Late nights turned into early mornings as Elena navigated the exhaustion and bliss of new motherhood. Her body ached from delivery, and she struggled to breastfeed at first, but each success felt like a small triumph. Camille advised her to postpone the court hearing, given her medical situation. However, Brandon and his legal team pressed forward, hoping to catch Elena at a weak moment. Reluctantly, Elena agreed to proceed, trusting that her documentation and professional legal support would prevail. Within 3 weeks of Caleb's birth, the court date arrived, a crisp morning. Sunlight lit the steps of the King County Courthouse in downtown Seattle. Nervous energy fluttered in Elena's stomach as she walked in with Camille. Baby Caleb was safely at home with Jasmine. She spotted Brandon in an expensive suit, arm in arm with Madison, who wore a smug grin. Daniel Voss stood near them, scanning documents and nodding in self-assured confidence. The courtroom was a formal yet tense space, Family court cases were being heard one after another. Finally, their case was called Whitaker versus Whitaker. Elena's heart pounded as she approached the bench. The presiding judge was the Honorable Jillian Reyes, a well-respected figure known for her zero tolerance for deception. Camille presented Elena's case meticulously. She outlined Brandon's infidelity, emotional abuse, and lack of concern for Elena's well-being during pregnancy. She highlighted Elena's stable income and supportive friends. Elena handed over documented evidence of Brandon's late nights, credit card statements, and social media posts. Daniel tried to interrupt with claims that Elena was emotionally unstable, referencing postpartum challenges. He argued that Brandon was willing to provide a luxurious lifestyle for the child and insisted that the baby's best interests lay with a father who had significant financial resources. Significant financial resources? Camille retorted. Are we discussing Brandon Whitaker's personal finances or that of his father? My client has proven her own professional success time and again. Brandon took the stand, painting himself as a victim. He claimed Elena shut him out, refused to communicate, and was obsessed with her own career. He even implied that the paternity of the child could be questioned, though he offered no evidence to support this wild assertion. The judge frowned at the baseless allegation. When it was Elena's turn, she spoke calmly, hands clasped tightly in front of her. She described Brandon's dismissive attitude toward her pregnancy, his public humiliation of her, and his ongoing affair with Madison Cole. She only provided facts, never once stooping to personal attacks. The judge's gaze softened at Elena's composure and the heartbreak she'd endured. Then came a dramatic twist. Daniel Voss unexpectedly called Madison Cole to the stand. Madison swanned forward in a designer dress, flipping her hair confidently. She claimed that Brandon was a loving partner who had rescued her from a toxic environment. She alleged that Elena was the real manipulator, and that Elena had withheld intimacy from Brandon, driving him to find solace elsewhere. Camille objected, pointing out that Madison's testimony had no direct bearing on child custody or spousal support. The judge allowed her to continue briefly, but Madison's statements quickly devolved into petty complaints about Elena's attitude. Judge Reyes looked unimpressed, as if she recognized a performance. Finally, the judge asked a straightforward question. Miss Cole, are you aware of the professional status of Mrs. Whitaker? Madison blinked in confusion. Professional status? She's just an employee at some small firm, I think. A faint smile tugged at the judge's lips. She then turned to Elena. Mrs. Whitaker, would you kindly inform the court of your current position? The courtroom air was thick with tension, every breath laced with judgment. The sterile walls, the rustling of legal papers, the sharp tap of a pen against a wooden bench, it all seemed distant to Elena, like background noise in a nightmare she couldn't quite wake from. She sat upright, back straight, despite the fatigue of new motherhood and weeks of legal warfare. Her hands folded neatly in her lap. Across from her, Brandon slouched in his seat like a bored schoolboy, barely hiding his irritation. Madison was perched next to him, all gloss and performance, tossing her hair as if the courtroom were a runway. Their attorney, Daniel Voss, stood with the confidence of someone who believed the show was already won. Then came the twist. No one expected it. Daniel, with the smug air of someone about to deliver a theatrical coup, had called Madison Cole to the witness stand. A few murmurs stirred in the room. Elena kept her face composed, but her insides twisted. She wasn't afraid of Madison's words. She was tired of the lies. Madison sauntered to the front like she owned the place. Dressed to impress, she looked like someone preparing for a fashion shoot, not a legal hearing. She began her testimony with well-rehearsed disdain, calling Brandon her savior, painting Elena as cold, controlling, distant. She twisted the truth like a knife, layer by layer. But as the judge listened, Elena could see it. Judge Reyes' expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. She was watching, reading beyond the surface. Madison's words began to falter, drifting from accusation to pettiness, complaints about Elena's tone, her attitude, her lack of femininity. It was no longer testimony. It was theater, and the performance was unraveling. Then came the moment that shattered it all. Miss Cole, Judge Reyes interrupted coolly. Are you aware of Mrs. Whitaker's professional status? Madison blinked. Professional status? Yes, the judge repeated, her voice laced with something between curiosity and control. Her occupation? Madison let out a light laugh. She works at some company, marketing or something, I think. Her voice was full of smug dismissal. That's when Judge Reyes turned to Elena with a deliberate, steady gaze. Mrs. Whitaker, would you kindly inform the court of your current position? Elena felt her pulse spike. For a moment, the room was silent. Every eye turned to her. She glanced at Camille, her attorney, who gave a tiny, reassuring nod. Elena straightened her shoulders. I'm currently the chief marketing officer at Nimbus Creative, she said clearly, and I've accepted a position as the chief executive officer of their new subsidiary, Nimbus Studio. The paperwork is awaiting finalization. There was a pause, a full breathtaking pause. It was like someone had cut the sound out of the room. Then the reaction began. Brandon's face froze in pure disbelief. He turned his head sharply, mouth slightly ajar, like he had misheard. Madison stiffened, her painted-on confidence melting. Daniel rifled through his documents as if they might magically contradict Elena's statement. Judge Reyes leaned forward, intrigued. CEO? She repeated with interest. Do you have documentation to confirm this appointment? Elena nodded, reaching calmly into her case file. Yes, Your Honor. I brought a copy in case it was relevant. She handed the signed letter across the courtroom. Her hands didn't shake. Not anymore. The judge flipped through the documents with a quiet intensity. A faint smile touched the corners of her mouth. Not amusement, but recognition. Respect. Mrs. Whitaker, she said at last, your achievements are remarkable. This not only reflects on your professional capabilities, but speaks volumes about your ability to provide a stable, enriched environment for your child. Elena's throat tightened with emotion, but she didn't let it show. This wasn't just about a title. It was about everything that came before. Every sleepless night, every insult swallowed, every doubt she had silenced so she could survive. And now she was no longer just surviving. She was standing tall. She was being seen. Across the aisle, Brandon looked pale. The man who once mocked her salary, her dreams, her very motherhood was now staring at a reality where she had outpaced him in every way. Elena didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The truth had spoken for her. All eyes turned to Brandon. His bravado crumbled, replaced by an anxious flicker. He had never imagined that Elena, the woman he belittled, was scaling corporate heights he could only dream of. The color drained from his face as the reality of her power and earning potential set in. Madison's composure cracked. CEO? That's impossible, she exclaimed, casting a bewildered glance at Brandon. You told me she was just scraping by. Brandon hissed at her to be quiet, but it was too late. The entire courtroom watched the cracks in their facade grow wider. Camille seized the moment. Your Honor, she said, it's clear that Mr. Whitaker's portrayal of my client's financial situation is inaccurate. Contrary to their claims that Elena is unstable or unemployed, she is in a position of significant responsibility and income. This alone contradicts the notion that Mr. Whitaker should have majority, custody, or lower child support obligations. Silence fell once more over the courtroom, but this time it wasn't the quiet of anticipation. It was the stillness of reckoning. Elena sat poised, her heart pounding softly like a distant drum. She kept her gaze forward, not daring to look at Brandon. She didn't need to. She could feel his energy unraveling, anger cloaked in fear, entitlement collapsing under the weight of reality. Judge Reyes adjusted her glasses and looked over the file in front of her once more. Her eyes flicked to Brandon, then to Elena, then down to the stack of evidence. Financial statements, social media screenshots, documented neglect, and now the CEO confirmation letter that had shifted the entire courtroom dynamic like a tectonic plate snapping into place. When the judge spoke, her voice was measured, calm, but behind it was quiet steel. The court has reviewed all submitted materials and testimony, she began. Mrs. Whitaker has demonstrated, both through documentation and witness accounts, that she has acted in the best interest of her child from the moment she became aware of her pregnancy. Elena felt her breath catch. Every part of her was clenched, waiting, hoping. She has shown remarkable professional stability, emotional composure, and clear, consistent efforts to protect and prepare for her child's future. Brandon shifted in his seat, frowning. Madison's smugness had vanished. She sat rigid and silent, her nails digging into the strap of her designer purse. Conversely, Judge Reyes continued, turning her eyes directly to Brandon. Mr. Whitaker has provided no credible evidence of stability, nor has he adequately rebutted the claims of emotional neglect, infidelity, or financial recklessness. Furthermore, the attempt to question the paternity of the child, without basis or proof, demonstrates a troubling pattern of deflection and irresponsibility. Brandon opened his mouth to object, but the judge raised her hand. Sharp, final. My decision is as follows, she said, her voice now echoing like the drop of a stone into a still lake. Full legal custody is awarded to Mrs. Elena Whitaker. Mr. Whitaker is granted visitation rights as outlined by the court schedule and is required to contribute to child support based on a revised financial evaluation, including half of all medical and educational expenses. A sharp inhale escaped Elena before she could stop it. Her fingers gripped the edge of her seat. It was real. Then came the final blow. Not from Elena, but from the bench. Judge Reyes turned to Brandon, her gaze unflinching. I advise you, Mr. Whitaker, to reflect on the role you play in your son's life, not in terms of what you believe you're owed, but what you are responsible for. Being a father is not a title. It is a duty. Brandon looked stunned, as if hearing those words from someone he couldn't dismiss had finally pierced his armor. The judge added, almost as an afterthought, but with the gravity of a closing door. Should Mrs. Whitaker wish to pursue additional damages related to emotional distress, she is entitled to do so in a separate civil suit. This case is now concluded. It was a sentence, final, irrefutable, and weighted with truth. The echo of it lingered in the courtroom like a bell tolling the end of a long war. Bang! The gavel fell, and just like that, it was done. For a long second, Elena remained frozen, not from shock, but from something deeper. Relief. Vindication, a swell of something she hadn't felt in so long. Freedom, a feeling that didn't come with fanfare, but with quiet certainty, the kind that seeps into your bones. Camille touched her arm gently. You did it, she whispered. Elena turned to her, blinking back tears. We did it, she said. Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with the overwhelming release of everything she'd held inside for months. Across the aisle, Brandon stood up too fast, nearly knocking over his chair. His face was flushed, his expression twisted with disbelief and fury. He no longer had the power to act on it. Madison didn't move. She stared ahead, as if trying to rewrite the past few minutes with her mind alone. But the truth had been spoken. Justice had chosen its side. Elena gathered her files, straightened her spine, and walked out of the courtroom, not broken, not bitter, but reborn. Every step was heavy with memory and lightened by closure. The moment the gavel struck, a surge of relief and triumph rushed through Elena. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she thanked Camille, who nodded with a small smile. Brandon hurried out of the courtroom, muttering curses under his breath, while Madison trailed behind, looking shell-shocked. Outside, reporters from local tabloids who had caught wind of a juicy divorce case snapped photos of the meltdown. Elena shielded her face and politely declined to comment. In the hallway, Jasmine met Elena with open arms. The victory was monumental, but Elena felt a tinge of sorrow for what she had endured to get here. She realized that triumph, though sweet, often carried the aftertaste of everything it took to earn it. She squeezed Jasmine's hand, whispering, "We did it," and Jasmine replied, "No, you did it. You stood up for yourself and your child." Over the following weeks, Brandon frantically tried to negotiate with Elena privately. He offered to reconcile if she called off the divorce proceedings. Mostly in an attempt to salvage his finances, Elena calmly refused. She had endured too much trauma to even consider going back. She explained that any communication from now on would go through Camille and revolve solely around visitation for baby Caleb. Madison, on the other hand, publicly distanced herself from Brandon after the humiliating courtroom debacle. Rumors circulated that she left town to focus on her own well-being. Brandon, bereft of both mistress and the illusions of grandeur, found himself alone. Elena resumed her duties at Nimbus Creative, balancing motherhood with the demands of her position. True to his word, Derek Hanley publicly announced her appointment as CEO of Nimbus Studio in a press release that garnered national attention. Suddenly, Elena found herself invited to speak at conferences about women in leadership, balancing family and career, and overcoming personal adversity. With each new responsibility, Elena remembered the core values instilled by her parents: humility, kindness, and fairness. She assembled a team that reflected diversity and ethical business practices. Overnight, her story turned into an inspirational headline: Rising from Betrayal to Break Barriers in Tech. Months rolled by, and Elena found a rhythm in her new life. Caleb thrived, growing into a bright-eyed baby who giggled at every silly face Jasmine made. Despite her heartbreak, Elena discovered that her capacity for love had only deepened. She quietly dated a fellow executive she met at a marketing conference, David Chang, a down-to-earth man who treated her with genuine respect. But opening herself up again wasn't easy. There were evenings after their gentle dinners, when Elena would sit alone, wondering if she was capable of trusting someone new. What if kindness like before turned into control cloaked in affection? What if she missed the warning signs again? David's patience helped. He never pushed, never pried. Instead, he simply showed up, with consistency, with grace. That, more than grand gestures, began to melt her reservations. Though cautious, Elena allowed herself to hope that a healthy relationship was still possible. Brandon, meanwhile, spiraled. The child support payments and his failing business ventures forced him to downsize his lifestyle. He lost his swanky apartment and had to move into a modest rental. The occasional newspaper snippet would mention his drunken outbursts or unpaid debts. Elena felt no pleasure in his downfall, only a sense of peace in knowing she was free from it all. Late one evening, Elena was rocking Caleb to sleep when her phone buzzed. It was Brandon. In a moment of hesitation, she almost ignored it. Something compelled her to answer. The voice on the other end sounded hollow, distant. "Elena, I'm sorry," he said, his words slurred. "I made mistakes. I lost everything. Madison's gone. My investors pulled out. I just need to see my son." Elena closed her eyes, swallowing a wave of pity. "Brandon, if you want to see Caleb, we can arrange something official through the court guidelines. I hope you get the help you need." Her calm tone unsettled him. "Elena, please don't hang up. She gently ended the call. She would not return to that dark place. She had moved on, and Caleb was her priority. A few Sundays later, Elena held a small baptism ceremony for Caleb at the local church, a simple, joyous event surrounded by close friends: Jasmine, Derek Hanley, David Chang, and a few relatives. She celebrated her baby's life and her newfound independence. Brandon was not invited, but he showed up unannounced anyway, lingering at the back of the church. Elena caught sight of him just as she handed Caleb over to the pastor. A flash of sadness washed over her, but she steeled herself and focused on the blessing of her child. It was not the time for resentment or confrontation. Her son's presence was sacred, untouched by the mistakes of the adults around him. Elena inhaled deeply, grounding herself in love rather than anger. After the ceremony, Brandon approached her. "May I hold him?" he asked quietly. Elena took a breath, then allowed a brief moment for father and son to connect. Brandon's eyes watered as he looked at the tiny face of Caleb. There was a flicker of something in his expression, remorse, maybe, or realization, but it came too late, buried under years of cruelty and absence. "I'm sorry," he whispered again. But Elena said nothing. The words were familiar by now, soft echoes that no longer held weight. Forgiveness didn't need to be spoken aloud to exist. It lived in boundaries, in the quiet grace of moving forward. She gently took Caleb back, nodding at Jasmine to accompany Brandon outside. Though she harbored no illusions about Brandon's capacity to change, she wanted Caleb to understand in the future that she had acted with decency and mercy. The legal divorce itself was a formality after the custody ruling. By the time the papers were signed, Elena felt more relief than sadness. Camille congratulated her on standing strong through a painful ordeal. Elena realized that her life was on an upward trajectory she never could have imagined a year earlier, free from the shackles of a toxic relationship. Brandon left an apology letter in her mailbox, but Elena never responded. She folded it neatly, tucked it away in a drawer, unsure if she would ever open that chapter again. Some things were better left unread, not out of bitterness, but out of choice. Elena chose peace. She chose the present. For now, her heart needed time to heal and focus on what mattered: her son and her career, both blossoming under her careful guidance. Elena's story reached a peak when she was named Entrepreneur of the Year by a prominent women in business organization. The award ceremony, held at the Hyatt Regency, was a grand affair. She arrived wearing a simple yet elegant black gown, greeting a host of colleagues and well-wishers. Jasmine took on babysitting duties for Caleb, ensuring Elena could fully soak in her achievement. As Elena stepped onto the stage to accept her award, she recalled every hurdle she had to leap. Brandon's mocking words, Madison's sneers, the court battles, and the fear of single motherhood. Yet there she stood, unstoppable. She dedicated her award to her parents, Marilyn and the late Gerald Davis, for teaching her resilience. She also made a special nod to Caleb, whose mere existence had given her the strength to rise above the storm. In the months that followed, Elena's life took on a beautiful normalcy. She developed marketing strategies for high-profile clients, traveled for conferences, and spent quality time with Caleb. She and David grew closer, gradually weaving a supportive partnership that respected each other's histories. At work, Nimbus Studios soared. They launched innovative campaigns that garnered major awards, attracting top-tier clients worldwide. Elena's leadership style, empathetic yet firm, set a new standard in the industry. She became a mentor for young women, especially single mothers, who needed encouragement to chase their dreams. Brandon drifted in and out of therapy. He made sporadic attempts to see Caleb, abiding by the visitation schedule. Elena allowed it, believing Caleb deserved to know his biological father, despite Brandon's flaws. But her heart had long healed from the illusions of romantic reconciliation. She had found peace in forging her own path, free from Brandon's cruelty. One day, out of the blue, Madison Cole reached out through social media, sending Elena a short message. "I'm sorry for everything. I wish you the best." Elena read it, paused for a moment, and decided to let it go unanswered. She had no desire to reopen old wounds. The best revenge, after all, was living well. Before she knew it, Caleb had turned 1 year old. Elena hosted a small birthday party in her condo, decorating the living room with pastel balloons. She watched her baby boy smash cake between his fingers with pure delight. Everyone who had stood by her side, Jasmine, Camille, Derek, David, filled the room with warmth and love. At one point, Elena stood off to the side, tears of gratitude sparkling in her eyes. She could hardly believe how far she'd come, from a humiliated pregnant wife to a confident CEO and caring mother. This was the life she had fought for, full of hope, surrounded by genuine people who celebrated her success rather than tore it down. A few weeks later, in the calm after the birthday celebration, Elena sat at her desk in Nimbus Studios' sleek new offices. She gazed out the window at the bustling Seattle skyline. A sense of purpose filled her. She pressed a button on her intercom to call her assistant. "Yes, Mrs. Whitaker." "Sorry, Miss Whitaker," the assistant corrected, remembering the divorce. Elena smiled. "Elena is fine," she said. She'd long since dropped Brandon's last name in official documents, reverting to her maiden name, Davis. "Could you schedule a meeting with the design team for Monday afternoon?" "Yes, Miss Davis," her assistant replied. "Congratulations again on the big contract with Sint. You're doing amazing things here." Elena thanked her and leaned back in her chair. The city gleamed in the afternoon sun, a metaphor for her own bright horizon. She'd survived betrayal, heartbreak, and public humiliation. In the end, she discovered her own power. She wasn't merely the scorned wife. She was Elena Davis, CEO, a loving mother, and an unstoppable force. Dear friend, sometimes life will try to silence you through heartbreak, betrayal, or the quiet erosion of your self-worth. But as Elena showed us, what defines us is not what breaks us, but how we choose to rise after the fall. The Stoics teach us that we cannot control what others do, only how we respond. And in choosing dignity over revenge, growth over bitterness, Elena chose her power. So if you're standing at a crossroads, unsure of your next step, let this be your reminder. Your peace is worth protecting. Your dreams are still valid, and you are never as alone or as powerless as you think. The most powerful story you'll ever write is the one where you choose yourself. If this message spoke to you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. It means the world to us and helps bring more strength-filled stories like Elena's to those who need them.